Hi guys, I'm Courtney.
And I'm Lisa.
And welcome to the next chapter in the Book of the Dead, brought to you by Darkcast Network, indie podcasts with a twist.
Whoa there, Sparkle Farts, my trusty unicorn. I've got to tell these good people about our show. Hey there, I'm CJ, host of Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. While I do have episodes on some of the more well-known cases from the LGBTQ community, such as Matthew Shepard, Brandon Tina, and the Orlando Pulse nightclub massacre, I cover world cases like the London nail bombing murders, Australia's Snowtown murders, in South Africa's corrective rape and murder of lesbians. I cover lesser-known cases like the murder of 21-year-old trans man Alex Van Dalsen in Indiana. Police called his death a suicide. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. I tell you about wrongful conviction cases, serial killers, and school shooters. My unicorn and I cover all sorts of crimes against the LGBTQ and crimes by members of the LGBTQ. You don't have to be part of the community to listen. All walks of life are welcome to become Rainbow Warriors, because you matter. And remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.
Hello, welcome to the next chapter. Lisa is not with me, she's not feeling well. But before we get into today's chapter, I want to correct myself from a previous chapter that we did where we covered the murder of Rowena Irani. I mispronounced her name, which was pointed out to me by a close friend of her family's. I was also given information in regards to her personal life, which I will speak about in an episode that we'll record soon, so keep an eye out for that. But I want to apologize for the mispronunciation. I'm usually very diligent in researching pronunciation of names and places, and for whatever reason, I had it in my head that I knew how to pronounce Rowena's name and did not look it up, which was an error on my part, and I apologize. So thank you to that family friend for A, the very, very kind email you sent me, and B, thank you for pointing it out to me so that I can fix my mistake. For today's episode, this is a case that is new to me, probably because I'm not well versed in the world of basketball. But for those that follow the NBA and have for a long time, this story may be familiar to you as it devastated the sports community as a whole. The story I'm going to tell you today is the murder of Lorenzen Wright. Lorenzen, who went by the nickname Ren, was born in Oxford, Mississippi to Deborah Marion and Herb Wright on November 4th, 1975. Growing up, he split his time between Mississippi with Deborah and Memphis, Tennessee with his father, and according to an article for Sports Illustrated, Lorenzen was a Memphis boy through and through. His friend, Ruis Williams, said that Lorenzen was, quote, like the king of the city, hometown hero stuff. He was so proud to say, "This is where I'm from." According to an article for ABC News, Deborah said that her son was a mama's boy through and through. He had loved his family, and according to what Bill Atkins, a family friend, told Oxygen, Lorenzen was loved by everybody. He was very popular and very giving. He said, quote, he walks in the door and everybody knows it's him. The guy would give you the shirt off his back. Lorenzen was also incredibly passionate about basketball and dreamed of making it as a professional basketball player. His love of basketball came from Herb, who was a professional player in his youth before becoming a police officer. According to Medium.com, he went to Lafayette High School in Mississippi, where he joined the basketball team before moving to Memphis for the start of his senior year. He attended Booker T. Washington High School, where he joined their basketball team, and he excelled at it. While in high school, he played for the Amateur Athletic Union, coached by a man named Julius Robinson. Julius would go on to introduce Lorenzen, who was 16 at the time, according to an article for We Got This Covered, to his daughter Shara, who was 21. Apparently, they got close very quickly, and they would go on to begin dating, although when exactly their relationship began, I couldn't be sure. But according to Medium.com, it began when Lorenzen started college at the University of Memphis. While at college, Lorenzen, who by this point was 6'11", joined their basketball team, the Tigers, and he was amazing. According to his stats on the University of Memphis' website, he played from 1995 to 1996, and he was the first team selection both years for two different teams, the All-Great Midwest First Team and the All-Conference USA First Team, and he was the only person in the program's history to earn these accolades. He also helped the Tigers to consecutive NCAA tournament appearances, as well as a 20-game win streak. By 1996, Lorenzen and Shara had had their first child, and Lorenzen, who was a sophomore at this point, entered the NBA draft and became the 7th overall pick by the LA Clippers, which began a very successful career with the NBA. Lorenzen would go on to be nicknamed the Howl because of how he screamed when he blocked a shot from the opposing team or successfully made his own shot. Lorenzen would go on to have a 13-season career with various teams such as the Clippers, Atlanta Hawks, Memphis Grizzlies, among others. In 1998, according to Oxygen, Shara and Lorenzen got married and they moved to Los Angeles, where they had moved into a custom home in Playa del Rey. During this time, Lorenzen made friends with teenage ball boy for the Clippers, Ian Rice, who Shara and Lorenzen both doted on as if he was one of their children. They bought him gifts, like a brand new suit and shoes for prom, and they even attended his graduation. Shara and Lorenzen would go on to have 6 more children, and they were always together, seemingly very much in love. Ian told Nathan Fenno of the LA Times, quote, "He was in love with her. She had a grip on him." In 2002, Shara and Lorenzen welcomed a daughter who tragically died 11 months later due to sudden infant death syndrome. In her honor, Lorenzen established the Sierra Simone Wright Scholarship Fund, and that same year, in 2003, he returned to the University of Memphis to finish his degree. When Lorenzen played for the Grizzlies, he opened up a sports bar and spread his wealth around town, setting up scholarships and paying for homes and cars for friends and family. He even set up a trust fund for a 9-year-old boy whose mother had died, and he lived alone in the house with her body for a month before he was helped. Former NBA player Elliot Perry said, quote, "Poll people in Memphis, from his teammates in high school to the NBA, and they'll tell you the same thing. Ren was fantastic, this big guy with a humble spirit." From the outside looking in, Lorenzen had an amazing life, and with Shara, they had a beautiful life together, one that many people would envy. A life of luxury and events that most people could only dream of. But by 2005, that facade had started to crack. According to the LA Times, in August of 2005, police responded to a domestic disturbance call at the Wrights' home in Memphis, and while no arrests or charges were made, Shara allegedly had answered the door with cuts on her hand and scrapes along her jaw. There was another volatile incident where Lorenzen and his friend Mike Gibson had allegedly been partying in the Wrights' RV with exotic dancers, when Shara walked in, chasing off the women, ripping Gibson's shirt, and completely trashing the RV in her rage. Lorenzen, for his part, had allegedly escaped out the window. Now, to sidestep for just a second, in 2014, Shara had written a book, Mr. Tell Me Anything, that was a work of fiction, but she had claimed that the main characters and the events of the book mirror her and Lorenzen's life together almost completely. She suggests that moments of infidelity and abuse in the novel were based on the true events that happened during their marriage. So, if that is the case, Their relationship continued to crumble, with Lorenzen allegedly cheating on her, and Shara, in at least one instance, allegedly catching him with another woman, beating this woman, and, quote, slapping the hell out of Lorenzen. Again, this, as far as I can tell, was not substantiated as fact, but she claims that these events that she wrote about in her book were true. Now, by 2009, Lorenzen had officially retired, and he and Shara had separated. They were $3 million in debt, and 2 of their homes had been seized by the bank as a result of overspending at the end of his career. So, because of these problems they were having financially, coupled with the allegations of cheating and abuse, their relationship finally ended. Although, according to Shara, she said that it was the risks that came with his career that doomed them. She told Sports Illustrated that Lorenzen was carefree and would let anyone into his circle, and she was uncomfortable with the people he was bringing around. The divorce was finalized in February of 2010, and a permanent parenting plan had been filed in Shelby County, Tennessee, which required Lorenzen to pay alimony and child support in the amount of $26,650 a month, and this was based on his prior income as a basketball player. This was due to Shara and Lorenzen's extremely lavish lifestyle and the need to, quote, continue to provide the children with benefits like a nanny and private basketball lessons. Additionally, he was also ordered to maintain a $1 million life insurance policy on himself. According to the order, which I read from the LA Times, it said, quote, if agreed upon by the parties, the father shall insure his own life in the minimum amount of $1 million by whole life or term insurance. Until the child support obligation has been completed, each policy shall name the child or children as sole irrevocable primary beneficiary, with the other parent as trustee for the benefit of the children to serve without bond or accounting. So Lorenzen did take out this policy that his children were the beneficiaries of, but Shara would have control over as trustee in the event of his death. So they were officially divorced. Co-parenting their children, Lorenzen was living in Atlanta and Shara stayed in Memphis. According to Lorenzen's oldest daughter, Lauren, a few months after the divorce was finalized, Lorenzen wanted to be with Shara again, which, to be fair, it seems as if she was his first love, so it would make sense that he would want to be with her again, considering they had spent pretty much his whole adult life together. According to the LA Times, Lawrence said, quote, he would tell us every day he was working to win her back. According to Medium.com, Lorenzen and Shara had started seeing each other again when Lorenzen would fly in to see his children. He was also contemplating going to Israel to play basketball there. Now, according to police, on July 17th of 2010, Shara sent a string of sexually explicit messages to Lorenzen. So, under the assumption that they were going to get back together, at least for the night, Lorenzen flew out to Memphis the very next day. Now, based on what I could gather, this was actually a planned trip. Lorenzen was heading to Memphis to see his daughter perform in a dance recital, and he was also going to attend his sister's baby shower. The text from Shara would have been an added perk. According to a close friend of Lorenzen's, Phil Dotson, he drove Lorenzen and his son Lorenzen Jr. to Shara's home that night, dropping them off around 10 p.m. Lorenzen had also planned to go back to Atlanta the next day, the 19th, because he had arranged to go back with his friend Jeremy Orange, as well as with his children, and they had planned to stop at Six Flags Whitewater on the way to have a fun day with the children. But when Jeremy arrived at Shara's home to pick everyone up, Lorenzen wasn't there, so Jeremy called him. But Lorenzen never answered. Now, when Shara was contacted by Jeremy and Mike Gibson asking where Lorenzen was, she said that he was probably off with another woman and that he was, quote, probably in one of his little holes, LOL. On July 22, 2010, 3 days later, Deborah, Lorenzen's mother, filed a missing persons report. Lorenzen missing his sister's baby shower had been bad enough. It's something she knew he would never have done. But the fact that no one had seen him in days was more than enough cause for alarm. So police start looking into Lorenzen's disappearance, retracing his steps, and they talk to Shara. Now, initially, Shara says that everything was fine. He had no enemies, and he left the house around 2 a.m. on the 19th, getting into an unknown car with an unknown driver. Shara thought he might have gone to Vegas. His father thought maybe Lorenzen had decided to go to Europe to clear his mind, and others suggested that maybe he had decided to go to Israel after all. A week after Lorenzen disappeared without a trace, Shara spoke to reporters, tearfully saying she wouldn't believe anything other than Lorenzen was fine and he would return home. But the very next day, Shara was telling police that Lorenzen was involved in drug dealing and that on the 18th he had left the home with drugs and money, adding that weeks earlier, strange men had shown up looking for her ex-husband. During this time, Deborah was also speaking to police, saying that Shara was acting strangely. Although the statement wasn't elaborated on, it seems, based on at least one source, that Deborah thought that Shara might have been behind Lorenzen's disappearance based on her behavior. To backtrack slightly, around midnight on the night Lorenzen disappeared, Germantown, Tennessee police received a 911 call. The caller was male and was, based on what was heard on the call, clearly being shot at, with 11 shots being identified on this call. Now, Germantown is 10 minutes away from Collierville, where Shara lived, and it seems as if, because the dispatcher identified the caller as being in Collierville, which was outside Germantown jurisdiction, he didn't report the call. Police investigating Lorenzen's disappearance finally heard about this call that involved an unidentified male and were able to match the voice to Lorenzen. Based on this, they traced the call to a wooded area by a golf course near Shara's home. On July 28th, 10 days after he went missing, police discovered Lorenzen's body in this wooded area. As he had been exposed to the elements in the middle of a Tennessee summer, the once 200-plus pound 34-year-old was almost skeletal in appearance, and dental records were used for his identification. According to Action News 5, it was discovered at autopsy that Lorenzen had sustained 5 gunshot wounds, 2 in the skull, 2 near his heart, and 1 in his forearm. He had sustained 4 different skull fractures as a result of the gunshot wounds, and he had also sustained multiple rib fractures as well as a fractured shoulder. According to toxicology reports, Lorenzen was not under the influence of any substances at the time of his death. The investigation of the crime scene turned up shell casings from 2 different guns, but not much else given the high animal traffic and the rain that the area had seen since Lorenzen had been killed. It also threw Memphis as a whole into a frenzy, demanding that justice be served and a slew of theories being given to police. Many people pointed their finger at Shara, citing the death that they had been in as a motive, and others thought that, given Lorenzen had been found still wearing jewelry, that his murder was a hit, that he had crossed the wrong person and was killed to send a message. In August, a neighbor came forward claiming that they saw 2 people using the fire pit in Shara's backyard on the night of Lorenzen's murder, which was unusual because it was so hot out. It was about 93 degrees outside and the humidity was through the roof, so not exactly an environment conducive to starting a fire. Depending on the source you read, some say that the neighbors saw Lorenzen and an unknown male by the fire, and others say it was Shara with an unknown male. Investigators, according to Medium.com, did investigate the ashes from the fire, and they found the burned remnants of what appeared to be paper clips, but nothing else was found that could be useful to the investigation. They also searched Shara's home, but it seems as if they did not find anything. Now, what's interesting is that sometime during the initial investigation, 2 different tips came in claiming that a man named Billy Ray Turner, who was a convicted felon, was involved in Lorenzen's death. But it seems as if the tipsters hadn't offered any additional evidence to support this accusation because nothing came of it. As I mentioned earlier, as part of the divorce settlement, Lorenzen was to maintain a $1 million life insurance policy on himself that was to be distributed to his children in the event of his death. However, due to all of his children being underage, Shara was made the executor of this money, and not even 1 year after his death, Shara had spent all but $5 of the insurance money. According to the LA Times, the money was used for a $1,500 custom headstone for Lorenzen's grave, furniture, 3 different luxury vehicles, a 5,300 square foot house, a pool, and a very expensive trip to New York, as well as various cash withdrawals and personal checks written out totaling around $344,000. According to Lorenzen Jr., he said that all of that money was spent on the children and not used for herself. But I will admit that seems a bit hard to believe. Herb Wright, Lorenzen's father, did end up suing Shera over the mishandling of the insurance money in 2015, and the resolution by the Tennessee Circuit Court was to establish a trust for the children. Shera would be the trustee, but she had to file with the court all money received into the trust, as well as anything that was paid out. Additionally, Lorenzen's pension totaling $184,000 paid by the NBA was to go into the trust as well. Shera, it turns out, failed to provide accounting statements to the court, and she ended up withdrawing as the executor of this trust. As a result, Herb was granted guardianship over the pension funds, and he and Shera, who had been battling over other matters related to Lorenzen's estate, settled out of court. To sidestep again, just to keep the timeline straight, in 2013, Shera's cousin Jimmy Martin was arrested and found guilty of second-degree murder of the 2007 death of his girlfriend. He was sentenced to 20 years and, according to Oxygen, in exchange for immunity and a lighter sentence, he told the police that he knew something about Lorenzen's murder. According to Jimmy, he said that Shera had asked him to help Billy Ray Turner, who was her landscaper at the time, kill Lorenzen, who she was luring to Memphis with the explicit text messages. He claimed he wasn't in town on the night of the murder, but he helped dispose of the guns used by throwing them in a lake in Mississippi. Now, police did dredge the lake in question, but never found anything, so they figured it was a bad tip. Now, the whole time this is going on, Lorenzen's case is stone cold, and Deborah seemed to be the only person actively investigating. She had an entire storage locker filled with newspaper clippings talking about her son's murder, as well as anything she deemed relevant to the case. She was actively questioning friends and acquaintances, and she was very vocal about her suspicions of Shera, who had, by this point, not only remarried, but had written her book that she claimed was heavily based on her marriage with Lorenzen, which, again, painted him as this adulterous, criminally involved abuser. She had also become an ordained minister and became heavily involved in her church. In a Facebook status referencing this, she said, quote, "Over the past few years, I have been called all sorts of things, including crackhead, gold digger, stripper, murderer, whore, and all other various terms. I gave it all to God, and He worked it out and works it out." In 2005, in addition to writing the book that put Lorenzen in such a bad light, she was also interviewed by Kelvin Cohen's, who she would end up leaving her second husband for. And when asked how she felt about being suspected of murdering Lorenzen even 5 years later, she said, quote, "That bothered me. That the first time they would try to find out who I was would be when they are trying to tie me to a murder of somebody I spent half my life with, somebody that I loved more than myself. That was so hurtful." Kelvin, in an interview with the LA Times, actually spoke about how Shera's behavior was strange sometimes after they had started dating. He said that frequently she would hide away in her closet that was filled with furs and Rolexes, and she would cry and talk to herself in there. Another time, she had played the recording of Lorenzen's 911 call for Kelvin and asked him if a voice that could be heard sounded like a man or a woman. He also claimed that she had nightmares involving Lorenzen quite frequently, and she would wake up in a panic. In February 2017, Shera and Kelvin broke up, and she moved with her children to Riverside County, California, to be closer to her brother Marcus. During this time, the investigation into Lorenzen's death was finally heating up, unbeknownst to the Wright family. In 2016, based on a credible tip that was received, the Shelby County Multi-Agency Gang Unit started re-examining the case in an effort known as Operation Rebound. They went back and examined the case as if it had just happened, trying to retrace Lorenzen's movements that night. They also re-examined the tips and leads that came in and came across what Jimmy Martin had said in 2013. So they head to the lake in Walnut, Mississippi and search it again. This time they were successful. On June 27, 2017, the FBI found a semi-automatic Smith & Wesson pistol in the lake, and the ballistics testing were a match to the bullets obtained during Lorenzen's autopsy. Police, 4 months later, obtained a warrant to tap into Shara's phone calls and leaked the finding of the pistol to the press. Police intercepted a phone call soon after the announcement of the murder weapon being found that Shara made to an unknown person, where she said, quote, "Someone done sent somebody somewhere to get something." They were also able to intercept a text that Kelvin sent mentioning the finding of the murder weapon, which he thought would make Shara really happy that they had a lead. But Shara seemed very panicky when he mentioned this. 4 days later, Shara flew out to meet with Billy Ray Turner, and they also intercepted another phone call where Shara told another unknown person that during the initial investigation in search of her house in 2010, police failed to find 3 different guns in the home. On December 5th, 2017, based on evidence that had been collected during the reinvestigation, police arrested Billy Ray Turner and charged him with first-degree murder, and a week and a half later, they pulled Shara over as she drove home with her 2 sons and arrested Shara for the murder of Lorenzen, charging her with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted murder. Now, Shara did not go to trial. She actually took a plea deal in 2019 because had she gone to trial and lost, she would be looking at 100 years. In exchange for a 30-year sentence, she pled guilty to facilitation to commit murder and facilitation to commit first-degree murder because police had learned in speaking with Jimmy again that there was an attempt in Lorenzen's life before the murder. He and Billy Ray Turner had snuck into Lorenzen's home through an unlocked window in an attempt to kill him, but Lorenzen wasn't home. The first count carried a 30-year sentence, and the second carried an 8-year sentence. They were to be served concurrently, and Shara is eligible for parole after serving 30% of her sentence, which is 9 years. That means that Shara could be released as early as 2027. During sentencing, Deborah said, quote, "Shara, I want to thank you for giving me my grandchildren back. I just hate what happened to my child, but he left me nice-looking kids for his grandma." Shara, while in prison, has maintained her innocence despite pleading guilty and has gone on to promote her second book. Billy Ray Turner was supposed to go to trial in September of 2019, but this was delayed so his attorney could go over new evidence. It was then delayed again due to the COVID-19 pandemic. When he finally went to trial in 2022, Jimmy was brought in to testify, where he spoke about how Shara had planned everything out and it was she and Billy who had killed Lorenzen. According to his testimony, he claimed that based on conversations after the fact, Shara had told Lorenzen on the night of July 18th that she was going to meet up with someone in the woods by her home to collect money. Instead, she met up with Billy Ray and they lured Lorenzen into the woods where they ambushed him. As he tried to escape, they shot him in the back. Jimmy claimed that both Shara and Billy Ray had weapons. She had a pistol and he had a shotgun, and after the murder, Shara picked him up so that Jimmy could help them clean up the scene, which included the use of a metal detector to find stray bullets. Then they drove to Mississippi and disposed of the pistol and shotgun and other items, including 2 other guns, which were thrown in a dumpster nearby. In March of 2022, Billy Ray Turner was found guilty of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy, and he was sentenced to 41 years on top of the 16 years he had been given in 2017 after his arrest for weapons charges because he was a convicted felon after being arrested on federal charges in 1992. In response, Deborah said the sentence, quote, "would never be closure because I'll never see my son again. This is just some satisfaction for me and my family." As for the motive, while Shara has never spoken about what led her to plan the murder of Lorenzen, Deborah says she knows the answer. Money. That's what it was about. And honestly, I'm inclined to agree. They divorced over money troubles, and upon his death, she gained control over his insurance policy that could keep her and her children in the life to which she had become accustomed to. Shara was up for parole in 2022 after serving less than half of her required minimum sentence, but she was denied, and she is currently incarcerated at the Deborah K. Johnson Rehabilitation Center in Tennessee. Billy Ray Turner attempted to appeal his sentence but was denied. As for Lorenzen's children, they are doing well. His sons have followed in his footsteps and were basketball stars in college, with his eldest son becoming a basketball coach, and his daughters are doing just as well, with one of them becoming a nurse, and I believe she is also a mother now. So it's great to see that, given the tragedy in their lives, losing their father and their mother being behind it hasn't stopped them from living their dreams, and I'm sure that Lorenzen would be so proud of his children for the lives they are leading. Thank you so much for joining me today while I tell you this story. Again, Lisa was not with me today. She is not feeling well, and to be quite honest, I believe I am getting sick as well. So I apologize in advance for what is probably a slightly scratchy voice. I also wanted to point out, in response to a review that was left saying that my voice was boring and dull, which is fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. My response to that really is, I try very hard to keep my voice in a certain tone and at a certain level, primarily because what I'm speaking about is death, the murder of innocent people who lost their lives in devastating and horrible ways, and I don't think it would be right for my tone to be anything other than neutral and respectful. But if that's not your cup of tea, that's not your cup of tea. I'm not mad about it. It's something I wanted to point out. I don't think it's respectful of me to speak about the loss of people's lives in an upbeat tone. But if you find my tone boring, I apologize. This is simply my voice. I don't think I sound like a robot. That is something that my brother sounds like. He knows it, he owns it, and he has in fact been punched in the face for it. So I don't think I sound like a robot. I don't think I sound dull or boring, but if you do, that's your opinion and you're entitled to it, and that's fine. But I wanted to point that out, or respond to it. Additionally, in the next chapter, I believe the next chapter, I will be having back a guest that I had on a few months ago. I'm very excited to have them back, and we will be discussing a topic that I have covered. So it'll be interesting to look at it from the view of someone who has been investigating and researching these crimes for a very long time. So I'm very excited, and I hope you all thoroughly enjoy it. But with that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you in the next chapter of the Book of the Dead. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this chapter of the Book of the Dead. And don't forget that you can always connect with us on Instagram. You can connect with us on Twitter, and you can absolutely connect with us on Patreon. We also have a merch store as well that we have frequent discount codes coming out for, so that you guys can get merch hand-drawn by myself at a better cost.
We hope you have a lovely rest of your week, and just remember, please be kind.
And don't forget to always stay safe, stay curious, and stay vigilant. Bye, guys.
Bye.